Good evening, everyone. As they said, I am Dr. Sri Kadapa Rao, consultant and director ENT, Dr. Rao's ENT Group of Hospitals, Hyderabad, India. Today, I'm going to talk about mucormycosis, which is just causing an apocalyptic-like situation in our country. My discussion today will range from the symptoms to the surgical procedure. Well, this presentation will be like a shadowing session with an ENT surgeon who is managing a case of mucormycosis. And by the end of this presentation, you'll know how to approach a case of mucormycosis from the time when a patient presents to us to the hospital to the time of discharge from the hospital. And this will be entirely from an ENT surgeon's perspective. So the agenda for today will be an introduction to mucormycosis, and I'll also be talking briefly, very briefly, about how it spreads, what are the symptoms that you need to watch for, and I'll just walk you through along with me about how to diagnose and manage a case of mucormycosis from an ENT surgeon's perspective. And we'll finally end the presentation with the preventive measures you can take in order to protect yourself and also from your family members from this mucormycosis. So by this time, all of us know that this mucormycosis is an opportunistic infection which is caused by a group of fungus, Mucormycetes. And these fungi, they are ubiquitous in the environment, that is, they are present everywhere, but they preferentially live in damp environment where there is low sunlight on the dead and decaying matter or manure, etc. So these fungi, they release spores which are easily aerosolized and dispersed into the environment. So what happens when these spores of the fungi enter into the nose, when they enter inside our nose? When the spores of this mucor fungus, they are inhaled, they enter the nasal cavity and they just get lodged on the flesh or the turbinates, what we call, inside the nasal cavity. In normal individuals, these spores are immediately being washed off by the normal mucociliary mechanism which we have inside our nasal cavity, or they are just phagocytized by the macrophages which are produced by our immune system. But in the immunocompromised individuals, like the people who are suffering with COVID or who have been recovered recently from COVID, or people like uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled sugar levels, or people who are on long-term steroid medications or some immunomodulator drugs, or people who have recently undergone some solid organ transplant like liver or renal transplants, or HIV patients, or people who are suffering with the hematological malignancies who have been taken medications for a pretty long time. In all these people, the immune system or the capacity to fight back against this mucor will not be so much. So this mucor, it starts as an opportunistic infection. And now, because there is adequate amount of sugars and good acidotic environment which is created inside the nasal cavity, this mucor enters into the blood vessels. And when it enters into the blood vessel, it cuts off the blood supply to the structures which are supplied by it. And after invading the blood vessels, as I told you, they rapidly spreads into the sinuses. It could be maxillary, ethmoidal, and the frontal sinuses, as I depicted there. And finally, the skin and the soft tissues which are surrounding them are entirely being necrosed. And because of the lack of blood supply, as the mucor cuts off the blood supply, all the structures which are supplied by these blood vessels, they start dying and they get necrosed, leading to a black gangrene like situation. And hence the name turned out to be black fungus. It is actually not called black fungus. It's because of the clinical presentation, it appears like black eschar or black gangrene. This mucormycosis is given the name black fungus. So, what are the symptoms that we need to watch for? In fact, what are the early symptoms that we need to watch for in case of mucormycosis? Early symptoms of mucormycosis are just similar to the symptoms of sinusitis, which are like people complain of normal nasal block or congestion along with some nasal discharge. And this nasal discharge could be blood stained discharge, or it could be blackish discharge, or some may just have black dried crusts which are discharging from the nose. And most of the people do have a one sided facial pain, and this is really important thing because it's not like a vague facial pain people get panicked about. The pain is so much that even if you take some pain medication, it doesn't go off. Even when you're sleeping, that pain still persists. So that's the kind of facial pain we ask you to watch out for. And some may have swelling on one side of the face, and this is because of the spread of the fungus and also surrounding zone of inflammation around the invading fungus, and that's the reason they have facial swelling. And some may complain of numbness over the cheek, and the reason why they have numbness is when this mucor, it starts invading the nerves, the infraorbital nerves. So they tend to have paresthesias or numbness or altered sensations. So that needs to be checked for. And some people may have toothache or loosening of tooth when the palate or the upper jawbone is being involved. And some may also complain of deep seated pain or blurring of vision or double vision. This is really important to watch out for, because right now in the early situations, people are just coming with the deep seated retroorbital pain, and this when the orbital apex, the apex of your orbit, is being involved. And whenever you experience such symptoms, immediately rush to an ENT surgeon or to an ophthalmologist, because the next thing what you land upon is sudden loss of vision. So that needs to be really checked for. And finally, you may land up with black skin lesions, which I have shown you earlier. It's when the soft tissues and the skin overlying is being necrosed by the fungus. It's a gangrenous situation, what we look out. So these are the symptoms what everyone should watch out for. So with this very brief introduction about mucor and the way it spreads and the symptoms, let us just get into the case presentations. I'll be showing you the most common symptoms the patients do present to us and how we deal with them. So this is a case of a 40-year-old female. A 40-year-old female patient presented to our hospital with the complaints of one-sided facial pain. She was a COVID positive patient and she recovered from COVID 20 days ago. She was admitted in the hospital, and as she was having difficulty in breathing and her oxygen saturations were low. She was given some antiviral medication, antibiotics, some steroid medications in order to prevent some from further complications, and she was safely discharged from the hospital. Now, since for the past 2 days, she has been experiencing nasal block and has facial pain on specifically more on the right side. She is a known case of diabetes and hypertension since 5 years. So, this would be a typical case presentation seen in most of our patients presenting to us right now with the mucormycosis. And that's why I just put forward this case so that you can just correlate. So, when a patient visits to us with these symptoms, how does an ENT surgeon investigate? So, how do we proceed now? After taking a proper detailed history about the COVID status, the medicine she has been using, her comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, was she on any thyroid medications, etc., we proceed with the ENT examination proper in our outpatient department at first. So, this is how we do it. We start with our routine ear, nose, and throat examination. And this is me who is sitting in my OPD room, and the one who is sitting opposite to me is not a true patient. She is my OPD staff. She just volunteered herself for being a practice patient. I placed this video specifically because just to make you feel that you're truly shadowing an ENT surgeon, and hope this helps out. This is how we do a physical examination. We put on the headlight. This is basically me putting on the headlight, and we examine the nose. with the help of a nasal speculum. That's a Tudicum nasal speculum which I am using. And this procedure is called anterior rhinoscopy. We check the nasal cavity. We check the color of the nasal mucosa. Are there any crusts which are seen? So after this, we place a tongue depressor and we check the throat, the oral cavity proper. And we also make sure that we check the hard palate in order to check any signs on the palate, such as some blackish discoloration or ulceration. And then we also check the ears and the post-oral groove on both the sides. This is the most important part, what we check for right now in cases of mucormycosis. We check for the paranasal sinus tenderness. This is how we check. We check for the maxillary sinus by palpating over the cheekbones, and that is how we check for the frontal sinuses which are present above the eyes, and also the ethmoidal sinuses which are present in between the eyes. So after a thorough ENT examination in our OPD, if we find something suspicious, then we proceed with a nasal endoscopy. In the nasal endoscopy, we check for once again, the color of the nasal mucosa, how are the turbinates or the flesh which are present there appearing, and are there any discharge or crust. And this is how we do. So before I show you how a diseased nasal endoscopy looks like, let me show you how a normal diagnostic nasal endoscopy appears to be. So here we are passing the endoscope through the right nasal cavity. You can see the inferior turbinate, the flesh, and we are advancing the scope even more further, and that's the choana, the posterior nares. And we are advancing it even more further, and that's the nasopharynx. That's the area where the nasal swabs for COVID-19 were taken. This is the nasopharynx. And this is the eustachian tube, a tubal opening, in fact, into the nasopharynx. This eustachian tubal opening, it connects to the middle ear via the eustachian tube. And now we are coming back, and this is the most important structure, the middle turbinate. And these are the openings lateral to the middle turbinate, and those fine hidden openings are the openings of the maxillary sinus, the frontal sinus, and the ethmoidal sinus. So this is how a normal endoscopy looks like. So this is the endoscopy of the patient who is having mucormycosis, and this is our first case scenario. I have placed a normal endoscopy picture here for you to compare. So this is the middle turbinate, a normal looking turbinate. The middle turbinate on the right side nasal cavity of this patient is completely blackened and it is completely avascular. You can appreciate that. You can also see thick black crust overlying it, indicating it is undergoing very bad necrosis, gangrenous condition. And the middle turbinate on the left side in the left nasal cavity is also losing its blood supply and becoming avascular, but not so much like the right side nasal cavity. It is in its early stages. And you could also see blood-stained discharge or blood-stained mucus, which is draining into the nasopharynx or the posterior ends of the nasal openings or the choana. So this is one more case scenario. Once again, I placed a normal endoscopy picture here. This is nasal endoscopy of one more patient. In this, the middle turbinate on the right side nasal cavity is perfectly normal. It looks absolutely normal. And the inferior turbinate, right inferior turbinate, is also absolutely normal. That is how it is supposed to look like. And on the left side, you could see that the entire middle turbinate is completely covered with a black eschar. So this is a very characteristic of mucormycosis in its early stages. And you could also appreciate that eschar being spreaded to the inferior turbinate of the left nasal cavity also. So the gangrene has started and it is extending within the nasal cavity. This is the case scenario to this. I've just placed patients who are presenting to us very early, not very gross situations. So if patients present to us in this early situation, the prognosis will be really, really good. So this is a case scenario 3. It's one more case scenario. So once again, I place the normal endoscopic picture on the corner. This is the middle turbinate, which is seen on the right nasal cavity. You could see a cobblestone appearance, which is seen in cases of early mucormycosis. And you can also appreciate a bit of color change than the normal mucosa, how it appears like. So this blackish color is seen on the right nasal cavity. And the inferior turbinate is good. It's a pinkish mucosa. It's just very well maintained. But on the left side nasal cavity, you could see it is once again completely covered with a black eschar, and it is surrounded by mucoid discharge, mucoid nasal discharge. So this is once again an initial presentation of mucormycosis where it is being limited to the middle turbinate area itself. And the left side inferior turbinate is once again absolutely normal. So it is just limited to the middle turbinate area itself. So this is case scenario 4. And once again, I place a normal picture on the corner side. And on the right side nasal cavity, once again, the classical cobblestone appearance is seen on the middle turbinate. That's what you're able to see. And you could see this a black crust underlying it onto the inferior turbinate specifically. This is specifically seen once again in the early stages of mucormycosis. And on the right inferior turbinate, you can see that it is covered by a white fungal slough. Okay, this is very well appreciated, I guess. And then on the left side nasal cavity, this patient had polypoidal nasal discharge with pus which is being outpouring from the middle meatus area. There was no as such black crust which is seen on the left nasal cavity. So this is the case scenario 4. This patient presented to us early itself, but it's not quite early, I could say. This is the endoscopic picture, and you could see that the middle turbinate on the right side was normal, but on the left side, this patient had black to red colored eschar with some amount of blood stain discharge. And when we advance the endoscope further, we could see that the eschar is being spreading to the middle turbinate also completely behind. And this is the hard palate of the patient, of the same patient. So the hard palate diagrammatic representation I've given over there, and this is the true patient where you could see some ulceration over the hard palate. These are once again the early signs we ask the patients to check for if you find any ulcerations or color changes in the palate bone. So hence this examination of the palate is also quite important other than the nose also. Coming to the next case scenario, you should remember that not all the fungal sinusitis are mucormycosis. They could be caused by other fungus like aspergillosis, etc. also. So on the right side, this patient had abnormal polypoidal growth with some pus which is outpouring from that. On the left side, it was nearly normal. This particular patient, I want to just extend on this particular patient. He was diabetic since 15 years, and on MRI and the CT scan, he was diagnosed with fungal sinusitis. So we did a surgery on him, and after the surgery, we sent the specimen for biopsy and also for fungal culture. And the fungal culture turned out to be aspergillus. It is fungal sinusitis, but it turned out to be aspergillus. And this is comparatively less invasive and is pretty much seen in most of the diabetic individuals. So it's really important not to just rely on the MRI, CT scan, and the nasal endoscopy picture. We make sure that, and there is a clear emphasis that we need to send this for fungal culture and identify the type of fungus causing it, because the entire medical management, the post-op management completely varies with the mucormycosis and other fungal management. And always remember, or not all fungal sinusitis are caused by mucor fungus. So that's what I want to stress on this endoscopic picture of the patient. So, when we find something suspicious on the diagnostic nasal endoscopy, this is what we do. As I told you, we do an nasal endoscopy, and if we find some secretions or crust, as shown in the previous slides, we proceed for a we take the secretions for a fungal examination, and this is how we do it. We take the nasal swab or nasal secretions. This patient lies this way on a propped up position. This is my colleague, Dr. Sanjay, doing that. This He's collecting the sample in a different bottle. We make sure that we place an endoscope first, and under its guidance, we go ahead. And the nasal secretions, whichever are collected this way, are labeled and they are sent for fungal examination. And these are examined by the microbiologist. So, what does a microbiologist do? He examines this, and he cannot examine this directly. He stains that with KOH, which is typically done for all the fungal staining. And on the KOH stain, this is how it appears. This is given. This is one of our patients, and this is given by Dr. Ashok. He's a microbiologist. And if the mucor is present, it appears in the form of a broad aseptate hyphae. And once again, remember that this test is highly observer dependent, and we cannot completely rely on this fungal staining. So, in the meantime, after we send the specimen for fungal staining, we also ask the patient, without any waste of time, to undergo an MRI and MRI brain and PNS with the orbit, which is done with a gadolinium contrast. We prefer getting a contrast MRI done, and also CT-PNS, CT scan of paranasal sinuses. This is mainly done in order to know the extent of the disease and the type of the disease, because in MRI we can clearly differentiate it from a fungal or a bacterial sinusitis. So once again, before I show you how a diseased CT scan looks like, because this is a shadowing session, let me show you how a normal CT scan appears to be. So these are the CT scan images of a normal person. And remember, the air, whichever you are able to see here, appears jet black in color. The bone, which is seen, appears white, chalk piece white color. And the pus, inflammation, or any kind of tissue appears gray in color. So you can see a pair of frontal sinuses which are located above the eyes, which are entirely black in color, indicating they are good, and a pair of maxillary sinus, this pyramidal shaped sinuses, which are present beneath the eyes, and a pair of ethmoidal sinuses, which are present in between the eyes, and a pair of sphenoid sinuses, which are present behind the eyes and beneath the brain. These are a pair of sphenoid sinuses. Here you can see all the sinuses are completely jet black, and they are filled with air, and hence they are very well ventilated and they are absolutely normal. So this is the case scenario 1. Once again, I placed a normal CT scan picture above for the comparison. Here you could see that the right maxillary sinus and the ethmoidal sinus and the middle turbinate are completely opacified, and we call this appearance as right maxillary and ethmoidal sinusitis. But we cannot understand whether this opacification is due to simple bacterial sinusitis or fungal sinusitis. We could just say that there is some kind of opacification which is going on, and there is something wrong with the right side maxillary and ethmoidal sinuses, because there is some sort of opacification, and the left side one appears absolutely normal. The same thing holds good on the posterior cuts also. So we proceed with the contrast enhanced MRI. Here we can see the hypodense, the arrow which I have pointed. There are hypointense areas, these ones, and there is no uptake of contrast enhancement here, which is surrounded by a zone of hyperintensity. This zone of hypointense areas where there is no uptake of gadolinium contrast indicates some fungal elements, and the surrounding zone of hyperintense areas indicates they are completely surrounded by inflammation. So it's a clear cut case of fungal sinusitis. Well, you can compare it with the other side. This is of the same patient. So this is the CT scan image of the same person, and this is how the MRI delineates it, that to contrast enhanced MRI. And this is the second case scenario. I placed a normal CT scans once again for your comparison. Here you can see that the entire left maxillary sinus is completely opacified, and you can see some amount of calcifications in between, and this calcification is very typically seen in case of fungal sinusitis, but we are not very sure about it. So we proceeded for an MRI, and this is how it looked on a contrast based MRI basically. So we can see that there is a clear zone of hypointensity, that's the arrow mark which I pointed here, zone of hypointensity, which is surrounded by a zone of hyperintensity. Once again, this zone of hypointensity is caused by the fungal elements because there is no uptake of contrast there, and the zone of hyperintensity is caused by normal inflammation surrounding it. So once again, you can compare it with the other side. This is a CT scan image of the same patient. And similarly, these are the posterior cuts of the MRI. You can see that there are hypointense areas on the other side maxillary sinus in an MRI. So they are clear cut fungal elements. This is the CT scan picture of the same patient where you could just see some opacification. That's why we surgeons prefer getting a contrast enhanced MRI. But of course, we need a CT scan because the bony window, bony delineation is very much better with the CT scan. So basically, we need two, both the CT scan and an MRI. And on MRI, we require more of T2 weighted MRI and a contrast based MRI. So, well, right now we know we have everything with us. We understood that the patient is suffering with mucor, and how do we proceed right now? So, we do an extensive surgical debridement of all the involved structures. It could be a part of the nose, or it could be a part of the paranasal sinuses, a maxillary bone, or the jawbone, the orbit, or the palate, anything. Which is involving it. And we send the specimen for fungal examination, fungal culture, and also for the biopsy. So now here comes the question: what is the rationality of surgery? Many of the common people, they were asking, why do we need to go ahead and perform a surgical procedure? Why can't we just medically manage it? Go ahead with the antifungal medications which can directly kill the fungus. And this is why we emphasize more on surgical procedure, because we know this mucor fungus, it invades the blood vessels, and after it invades the blood vessels, it causes thromboembolism, and this cuts off the blood supply to the tissue, and this leads to tissue necrosis or the death of tissues, which leads to gangrene. And this antifungal medications whichever we are giving to the patient, it cannot be penetrated into this dead necrotic gangrenous tissue. And because this good penetration, for this purpose of good penetration of antifungal drugs, it is really very important to completely eradicate, to completely remove the necrosed tissue surgically. So basically, for the good penetration of the antifungal medications, we need to go ahead for surgical debridement. And not only for that, we are reducing the fungal load in the body. So we are removing the necrosed tissue from the involved side, and when we are removing this necrosed tissue, we are basically removing the amount of fungal load in our body. And of course, because we have removed much of the fungal load in our body, this reduces the dose of the antifungal medications which we are giving to the patients, and also the duration of time these antifungal medications are to be given for a patient is also much decreased when a good surgical debridement is being done. So, with that being said, I'm proceeding with the surgical procedures which are done on our patients. So, the two MRI CT scans which I placed, and I'm not placing very gross surgical videos on this online platform. I know it's very disgusting. So, yeah, this is how it looks. This is the endoscopy picture of the right side. I'm just proceeding with the surgical video. So once again, this is the endoscopic picture of the same patient, the first patient which I placed. This is the right-sided nasal cavity, and we are able to see the entire necrosed tissue, necrosed middle turbinate, and we have exposed the middle meatus area also. Now we are cutting off the middle turbinate, and here I'm not using any powered instrumentation because this specimen which should be for sent for fungal examination should be very handled with delicacy, because the hyphae and all, they get disrupted. So we did not use any micro debrider in this first. And right now uh, I'm just removing all the dead and necrotic tissue with the help of a micro shaver or a debrider. This is a powered instrument which we use in all our endoscopic sinus surgeries. And you can, as you can observe, the entire bone is extremely friable, and the entire tissue is completely avascular. And right now here I'm using a coblator, and this coblator is mainly used to provide a bloodless surgery. And this step is mainly to access the lateral wall of the nasal cavity, and to directly enter into the maxillary sinus area. And what you are able to see is the anterior border of the pyriform aperture. And this bone, which separates from the lateral wall of the nose to the maxillary sinus, is being drilled off with a drilling machine, which it's a nasal drill which we use in our endoscopic sinus surgeries. And this bone, as you can see, it is completely drilled off. And this procedure, we call it as medial maxillectomy. And if you can observe, there is no incision which is given from outside. Everything is being done from inside, and this is being done when the patient has a limited disease. And now you could see the entire maxillary sinus, the interior of the maxillary sinus is completely exposed, and the disease is entirely removed. And you could see that's the nasopharynx area. So why do we widely open this is not just for the disease clearance, but also for the post-op surveillance, so that we could see the entire nasal cavity and the maxillary sinus in a single go, at a single glance, even in the post-operative period, so that we could give repeated washes and remove out whatever are the crusts which are seen. And that's the opening of the sphenoid sinus. This is the skull base area, whatever you are able to see. And this is the interior of the sphenoid sinus. This is the skull base or the sella turcica. And here we will be able to appreciate the optic nerve if we go inside. Once we cut open that, we are directly into the middle cranial fossa. So that's the first surgical thing. And this is another case scenario. Now, I'm on the left side nasal cavity, and I'm using an angled endoscope and visualizing the maxillary sinus ostium. Well, this is once again a minimally invasive surgery which is being done. You could see the bits of fungal tissues which are being removed. I know this is extremely gross, but because this platform is meant for doctors, I just place this video straight away. And we remove the entire fungal debris this way. This is the interior of the maxillary sinus. Once again, I'm using a 70 degrees endoscope over here. Once all the fungal tissue is being removed bit by bit this way. So that's the interior of the maxillary sinus. You could see some edematous tissue and some amount of pus there, some ulceration also. And this is what was appearing hyperintense on T2 MRI, and those are the fungal tissues which are being taken from the nasal cavity. And you could see this is the nasal cavity picture on the other side, on the right side maxillary sinus. Once again, this patient had some fungal debris on the right side also, and these were appearing once again hypointense on the MRI. If you remember, I kept the MRI of the same patient in the previous slide of mine, and this is how we remove it bit by bit. It is broken, so the entire contents are scooped out this way. So that is how the fungal elements appear inside our nasal cavity. So after this entire fungal contents are removed, we give a thorough wash and post-op surveillance will be made, and these pieces are sent to fungal culture, biopsy, as well as fungal examination. So this is our OR, operating room, and this is the final image how we get after a minimal invasive surgery with an endoscopy. You can appreciate that all the sinuses are being widely opened here, and thus the skull base. And we use a navigation equipment at our center, which is like a GPS for our cars basically, and it guides us exactly where we are. See, this gives us X, Y, and Z axis, and this is on the other side nasal cavity on the right side. And you could see all the tissues are well bleeding, they're completely vascular, and still the very good job is done being exposing the entire skull base, and the entire right maxillary sinus is being widely opened. So this basically avoids lots and lots of morbidity for the patient, but still doing an excellent job. That's the importance of early diagnosis and early treatment. The prognosis will be extremely good. Always remember, once again, the surgeries whatever we are performing are tailor made. So if only one sinus, if only the maxillary sinus is involved, we perform a endoscopic sinus surgery with a medial maxillectomy, what I have shown earlier. So this bone will be entirely removed and all the contents will be drained out. And if the sinus as well as the orbit both are involved, we do a medial maxillectomy and also an orbital wall decompression. It could be medial or inferior orbital wall decompression when there is a good vision being maintained by the patient. When the sinus and also the orbit is involved and there is no vision for the patient, we do a suprastructure maxillectomy where we do the upper part of maxilla is being removed and also entire orbital excentration. The orbital orbit will be entirely removed because there is no vision, there will be of not much use. And when the sinus and the palate, the partition wall which separates from the nose to the oral cavity is involved, only these two are involved and the lower part is involved, lower part of the sinus is involved, we do an infrastructure maxillectomy. Sometimes if the maximum part of the sinus involved, we give a proper Weber Ferguson incision and we remove the maxillectomy proper. But only if the inferior part of the sinus is involved, we go ahead with an infrastructure maxillectomy where the lower part of the maxillary sinus and the palate is being removed, and once again it will be reconstructed with the obturator. And once again, if the sinus, the orbit, the sinus, the orbit, and also the palate and even the brain is involved, we from the ENT surgeons, we do a total maxillectomy, and the oculoplastic surgeons will be doing, I mean, ophthalmologists will be doing a complete orbital excentrate, and the debridement, surgical debridement of the brain will be done by a neurosurgeon. So always these surgeries are just tailor made. So, do you think this is the end of the situation? Absolutely no. After the surgical procedure is done, the patient will be taken over by the physician or an infectious disease control specialist. So, Once the biopsy report is out, the fungal culture specifically states that the patient has mucormycosis, and the fungal stain, everything has come out to be mucormycosis. We hand over the patient to the physician, and the physician will be starting the patient on IV amphotericin B, which will be given for a minimum of 14 days period for a good antifungal coverage. And in the meantime, we ENT surgeons keep checking the status of the nasal cavity. How is the cavity healing? And also do a serial nasal endoscopy, check the clinical status of the patient, etc. And we also send the patient for serial MRIs. We, in the meantime, we check the CRPs, the C-reactive protein of the patient, the liver function tests, how are the ESR values, are they elevating or it's being maintained. And if everything by God's grace is good, if there is no disease recurrence, if the serial MRIs turn out to be good, then the step down therapy will be started by your physician, where the IV medications will be stepped down to antifungal medications, and mostly they'll be given for about 3 months, minimum of about 3 months. So this slide I specifically kept here because I just want you to know what's happening in the real situation. Or just imagine an average individual of about 50 kgs weight individual. He'll be requiring 300 milligrams of IV amphotericin B. That is, for a normal patient, 5 milligrams per kg body weight of IV ampho B should be administered. So for a 50 kg individual, he'll be requiring a 300 milligrams of IV amphotericin B. That is accounting for about 6 vials per day, because each vial consists of only 50 milligrams of IV ampho B. So for about 14 days, each individual patient will be requiring about 84 vials. So even that's not the end. They further go ahead, if everything is good, they further go ahead with the step down therapy. In the step down therapy, he'll be given oral posaconazole or isavuconazole, whatever is available, for about 6 weeks of a minimum, or about 3 weeks if it is a kind of aggressive, 3 months if it is a kind of aggressive thing. So imagine it's about for 6 weeks. On the first day, this patient will be starting about 600 milligrams of posaconazole, if they are giving posaconazole. That is 6 tablets on the first day. And from the next day, he'll be giving about 3 tablets, because each posaconazole will be 100 milligrams and 300 milligrams should be taken per day. And this will be for about 6 weeks. So it's approximately 129 tablets for each patient. So 84 vials of amphotericin B and 129 tablets per each person. And over the last few months in our country, India, more than 10,000 mucor cases have been recorded. Everyone knows about this, and it has been declared and projected as an epidemic outbreak on May 20th, 2021. So how do you think that the government will be able to provide you such large amounts of amphotericin B in such a short time? See, if the disease was a much more common one, like the diabetes or any other condition, this number, this 10,000 number, it's not at all, for such a population of our country. Even in India's biggest institutes, only 3 to 4 mucor cases will be seen usually per year. And suddenly, if there is a surge of about 10,000 cases in a span of 3 to 4 months, it is impossible for our healthcare system and pharma infrastructure to manage it, to control it. And that's the reason there is an extreme shortage of amphotericin B medications in our country. So, with that being said, let us look into what are the simple measures that can be followed in order to protect ourselves from mucormycosis and to prevent ourselves from mucormycosis. The first and the foremost thing is strict control of hyperglycemia. You know, our country, India, is considered as a world capital of diabetes. So, people who have had COVID or recovering from COVID, always remember they tend to have very high blood sugars. Even the patient who were non-diabetic earlier are going to a state of transient diabetic stage when recovering from COVID. So always make sure that you are checking your sugar levels even at your home, especially the diabetics. You maintain a glucometer properly and monitor your sugar levels. And the next important thing is avoid reusing the mask. Yes, the entire medical community is stating this, that masks are not to be reused. And the hypothesis is that the moisture we exhale into the mask contains humidity, and this moisture, it just gets trapped in the inner layer of our mask. And this humid environment is really good for the myocard to grow. And on reusing this mask, once again, we start inhaling this myocard into our system. So the surgical masks or even N95 masks are not supposed to be reused. And the cloth masks, whichever you are using, are to be washed every day and dried every day in a proper sunlight. And right now, because of this COVID situation, we are everyone are quarantining, and many of us are doing gardening, some compost preparation at home, growing our own vegetables. But make sure that you are wearing proper gloves, masks, and if you have a proper garden at your home, make sure that you are wearing good long shoes and long sleeves shirts also along with a mask, because this mucor has a specific affinity to grow in the dead and decaying organic matter, and even in the manure or the compost bins or in the garden soil also. So make sure that you are well covered when you are gardening or preparing your own compost bins. And specifically, we are make sure that you ensure that your bio waste which is present in your home is every day being disposed. It should be disposed on a daily basis, not just placing itself for some compost preparation or something, not at this time specifically. And avoid steam inhalation. This is what we have been stressing for a past couple of days. We have been seeing several mixopathy people stressing more and more on taking steam inhalation. Take steam inhalation to your glory every day. And we have been seeing patients taking steam inhalation more than 3 or 4 times per day, just to avoid themselves from this COVID situation. But always remember that our human bodies is such a good thing that it has given a very good slimy mucosal layer in the nasal cavity, which just washes off all the pathogens whichever enter our nasal cavity. And once you start taking more and more of steam inhalation, you are basically destroying that slimy mucus layer which is present inside. The normal sinus cleansing capacity is lost, and it is becoming more and more dry, and it is making prone for the infections. And also one more thing, the vaporizers which we are using, we just use it, just switch it off, and once again forget about that we are having water in it. And this moist environment which is present in the vaporizers, it's not being allowed to dry, and it is not cleaned properly. And this provides a proper suitable environment for this mucor to grow. And once again, when you start the steam inhalation, this is being inhaled into your body. So please try to avoid excessive steam inhalation, or try to completely avoid steam inhalation. That's what we ENT surgeons are specifically telling you. And avoid self medication, specifically over the counter medications. And I've seen several young people just just going through this Google and taking self medication. Overuse or misuse of steroids, misuse of antifungal medications, irrational use of antifungal, antimicrobial, antiparasitic medications are being done. So please put a check for that self medication thing, and stop using over the counter medication. Please consult a physician or your ENT surgeon, or whoever nearby, a good doctor nearby, if you have some symptoms of mucormycosis. And avoid overuse of zinc and iron supplements, because still a lot of research is going on this. But the previous research states that zinc and iron are really important growth factors for the mucormycosis growth. So, in vitro studies were done in the past, which states that mucor specifically requires zinc and iron for its survival. So, and in the recent times also, most of us have advised to take almost 18 milligrams of elemental zinc for the women and 22 milligrams of elemental zinc for men in order to save ourselves from COVID situation. But right now, with the increased incidence of mucor in our country, we are advising you just to minimize your multivitamin medications and take them only if you have some symptoms which are persisting. And finally, we are asking you to get a vaccine. This is like a marriage thing. There are many memes which are going on. Initially we asked you to get a vaccine, but you were hesitant to take the vaccine. Now we are in a shortage of vaccine, but by God's grace, once again the healthcare system entirely boomed up. And there is a very clear evidence stating that people who have got both the shots of COVID vaccine are really protected with COVID as well as the mucormycosis, as this is an opportunistic infection. So, if given a chance, you just completely get yourself vaccinated, whatever vaccine it is. All the vaccines are equally potent enough, and this definitely helps us from avoiding the third wave itself and protecting ourselves from the third wave. So, with this, the take home message I would advise is first and foremost thing, have strict control of sugar levels. Better to maintain a glucometer, as I mentioned in my earlier slide. Keep a watch on symptoms, whatever I mentioned you earlier. And do not panic. Once again, if you have any of the symptoms, consult an ENT surgeon immediately, because the early diagnosis is the key for the successful outcomes and to prevent lots and lots of morbidities which is caused by this mucormycosis. We may order you certain nasal endoscopy, certain fungal examination, CT scans, MRIs, some ferritin levels, IL-6 levels, C-reactive proteins, etc., whatever. But do not hesitate to get the investigations done, because this is how we are going to protect you. And finally, get a vaccination done. All the vaccines, as I said, are equally potent enough, and please go ahead and get the vaccinations. You can always contact me. I am a consultant and the director of Rouse ENT Group of Hospitals, and I've given my number. This is the number. You can directly consult the hospital, and these are my Instagram credentials, and that's my mail ID. And you could also contact the Medversity people so that they could help you out in sharing the presentation or any of the things which you are worried about. So with that, I'm ending my presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions are, accepted now. Yes. The first question is from Dr. Manish. Please go through some light on other antifungal medications. See, I do not want to stress much on the antifungal medications, because that will be handled by a physician or an infectious disease specialist. We actually ask you to go through to have a liposomal amphotericin B, because of the less renal toxicity and the less IV infusion related toxicity which it has. There is other suspension, non-liposomal or lipid complex, and the other one is amphotericin B deoxycholate thing. So this amphotericin B deoxycholate solution we are using right now to pack the nasal cavities so that it could just infuse itself. And the problem with this thing, deoxycholate solution or the non-liposomal thing, is because of the toxicity which it causes. Rest everything almost the same. And also, when for the intracranial extension, whenever is there intracerebral involvement, when there is there, the non-liposomal thing would not function much. And coming to the voriconazole and other antifungal medications, mucor will not much, as far as I know, because I'm more specific into the surgical regards. But as far as I know, it has not much effect on the mucor fungus, but it has really good, these azole derivatives, the voriconazole, itraconazole, etc. They may be acting well on the aspergillus or other species of fungus, but not much on the mucor species. Rather than that, isavuconazole and posaconazole have been given a very good good results. Posaconazole will be given 300 milligrams bi-daily in the form of oral tablets, or in the form of IV medications, and isavuconazole will be given 200 milligrams bi-daily. Once again, on the first day you'll be given, first and second day you'll be given three tablets. So it will be accounting for 600 milligrams and first and second day. From the third day, isavuconazole will be started 200 milligrams by daily, and with the posaconazole it will be 300 milligrams once a day for about 4 to 6 weeks maybe. Once again, it will be a salvage treatment. It is not the treatment for mucormycosis. The treatment will be always liposomal amphotericin B. So hope I answered your question, Dr. Manish. The next question would be from Dr. Ajay P. Karana. How do we prevent black or white fungus? Well, I have clearly mentioned out in my slides. Always, as you asked, prevention is better than cure. The most important thing is strict control of your blood sugars, because there's a very clear evidence stating that high blood sugars, indiscriminate use of steroids and antifungal medications, and not wearing a mask properly, and of course the new mutant variant, the Delta variant, what WHO has named it, is causing for the 80% more prevalence of mucormycosis in our country, India, when compared to the others. So the preventive measures would be just controlling your sugar levels, and not using antibiotics or antifungal medications irrationally, always wearing a double mask, and not reusing the mask whatever you're wearing. And once again, this mucor, it is present everywhere, but it is because specifically present in the manure or gardening soil or the compost material. We are asking you to wear gloves and mask even at the construction sites, and also while gardening and all. And once again, getting your vaccination done is one more preventive measure that you can do. And strict things, stop taking steam inhalation. Especially we Indians are doing this more and more. Please stop taking steam inhalation. Well, these preventive measures are more than enough, I would suggest. And one more question, once again from Dr. Ajay Karana. Is there any alternative remedy to eradicate black or white fungus? See, once again, white fungus is candida. It's a normal thing. It's already been established, and it's a very common one. Regarding the black fungus, once again, the same measures whichever I have asked you to follow. These are the things, and we should hope for the best to avoid the third wave. And this is how we are going to completely eradicate it. Okay. The next one is from Mr. Chetan Prakash Vyas. Sir, it's excellent lecture. How I find section 1. So, Dr. Chetan ji, this is not sir, this is ma'am. My name is named so as Dr. Shri Kadapa, but I am a lady doctor. So, if you would like to have the lecture, it's always there with the Medversity people on excellent online platform. You can just ask them anytime. They would share that lecture with you. And once again, they say, what about webinar participate? Yeah, that will be given by them. Mr. Chand Sachidananda Patra, what is black fungus and white fungus? Once again, in microbiology, there is nothing like black fungus or white fungus. It is what we named ourselves depending on the clinical presentation, because this mucor fungus, it's causing entire gangrenous condition, necrosis, and it is appearing entirely black. We named it as black fungus by ourselves. And this white fungus, it's not specifically white fungus, it's because of the, once again, clinical presentation. It's caused by Candida albicans. Albicans in the sense it's white in color. There are several sites where this Candida could grow. It can be growing on the oral cavity, where we call it as oral thrush. It could be growing in the nasal cavity, but it's not that common in the nasal cavity. It could be growing in your intestinal system. It could be, even the gynecologists see it as vaginal candidiasis. It's very common, and we usually give fluconazole for this. It's but the only problem with this is it requires, once again, any kind of fungal thing requires long-term medications. But nystatin or fluconazole or fluconazole will just handle the situation with the black fungus. Once again, with I think I answered the second question, how it will get cured. One more question from Miss Ansi Varghese. Dr. Shri, do patients with trigeminal neuralgia-like conditions need to get checked to confirm if they are not having myocarditis? Yes, doc, it's always better to get checked. But with the trigeminal neuralgia, you already know it's a nerve related pain. You would have already been consulting your doctor. So if it supplies the entire one half of the face, and you'll be already on some neuroprotective medications. So if you have any predisposing factors, whatever I have mentioned, it is always better to get it verified from an ENT surgeon, from your nearby ENT surgeon, because everyone has a nasal endoscopy. We can just check your nasal mucosal status, and we can just let you know what's happening, whether it is entirely because of trigeminal neuralgia, that neuralgic kind of pain, or with this mucormycosis. Once again, a question from Sachidan. What is the duration of duration of infection, the time it starts, it hardly takes some from the onset of symptoms. What we have been seeing, we were examining the patient, if we examine the patient on day one, on the next day when they go for MRI or some other investigation, and we post on the other day. So for example, we are taking 2 days for the entire picture and all. Within this span of time, this is spreading. So I do not want to mention on the exact time duration, because this creates some amount of panic within you. But it is an aggressive spreading disease, that is what I want to mention. So this spreads through the blood. It causes vascular invasion and causes thromboembolus. We do not know whether this fungus is directly messing up with the sinuses, or messing up with the brain, or directly messing up with the carotid artery and causing all the complications. And right now you have seen in newspapers also, where the western part of Maharashtra and Gujarat people, they have landed almost in stroke conditions also. This is because even the skull base is being involved, and directly it's causing a compression over the carotid artery. It could be external or within the internal carotid artery, causing complete hemiplegia. And that's the situation right now. So don't neglect yourself about the duration. Just know that this is something which is spreading very aggressively. And once again, it depends on the status of the patient also. How old are you? What are the predisposing factors which you have? So I think that answers your question, doctor. Question from Amoxy. How do handle red eye after COVID recovered patients, as they don't show any sign of fungal infection or with mild toothache? Red eye is once again completely different. It could be some mild irritation within the eyes, which can be just handled by your ophthalmologist itself. See, once again, this is a multidisciplinary approach. We ask ENT surgeons to first contact or first visit, because the only reason is that we surgically debride off whatever the tissue you have, and we save you from the aggressive spread. The minor symptoms like mild redness and all, you really need not worry about it. But if you see something abnormal from the normal situation which you're going through, it is always better to consult your physician, the consulting COVID treatment whoever has given. Or if you just have something which is limited to the eye, you need not worry. It could be a simple bacterial infection, but it persists for a much longer time, for 3 or more days, in spite of taking some antibiotic medications and all. It is always better to consult an ENT surgeon. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Mr. Manikantham M, is it rhinocerebral type of is it the rhinocerebral type of? Yeah, the thing, what I mentioned doesn't have a cerebral involvement, because I am ENT surgeon, so I limited myself to rhinomyocomycosis or rhinoorbital myocomycosis. As I told you, this is a multidisciplinary team of approach where ENT surgeon does that, and the orbit will be handled by an oculoplastic surgeon, and the brain will be handled by a neurosurgeon, and postoperatively will be handled by a physician or an infectious disease specialist. And the meantime, we always collaborate ourselves with the radiologist for the serial MRIs, for the pre or post op MRIs, and a microbiologist and a pathologist will also be of utmost importance for us in order to give the reports whenever are required. So yeah, this is more or less that kind of mucormycosis. It spreads everywhere. Remember, mucormycosis is not just limited here. It may there are several types of mucormycosis. Even you have cutaneous mucormycosis. In fact, there are several other pulmonary mucormycosis also on the rise now, especially in Bengaluru. So yeah, need not worry about it. Once again, there is a solution for everything. And question from Dr. Nazir Ahmed, can we easily identify this organism in normal culture? Yeah, this mucormycosis differs from other kind of fungal organisms, because as soon as you keep this on Sabron's dextrose agar, which will be done by a microbiologist. So this grows very aggressively. Probably within a period of 24 to 48 hours, the culture will be out. It typically grows as a cotton wool kind of appearance, and over a period of one day, you can see the black spores which are rising out. And we call this as lid lifters because they grow so aggressively that they lift the lid, which I've been my microbiologist Dr. Ashok shared with me the pictures. If you want, probably I'll be sharing with the Medversity people so you can know more about it. Okay. Question from, I have a pretty more. Dr. Sundar, do we have time? Am I just killing the time?
Yeah, we can. I mean, the time is done, but we can continue with the Q&A. No problem.
There are many. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, quickly finish it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Annapurna got a question. Ma'am, can you please highlight the disease symptomatology right in the beginning? Also, how long does it take for the disease to spread out in the PNS? Thank you once again, Dr. Miss Annapurna Garu. The disease and all symptomatology and all, it's there with the Medversity people. You can always contact them so that they could share in the mail. If you want, I could just tell there will be nasal block or nasal congestion, and the most important thing what we are observing, especially in the Telugu speaking states, is facial pain and facial swelling. And you should also check for the signs on the palate. Loosening of tooth also should be checked for. And one most important thing is blurring of vision, or any sudden loss of vision, or deep-seated retroorbital pain is the most important thing, because that is giving gross morbidity. When it involves the orbit, we are removing this orbit. So these are the symptoms what you need to check for. And how long does it take to spread outside the PNS? It once again depends on what a kind of person you are. If you are in young age, if you do not have any comorbidities, if your immune system is good, probably a week, not even a week, for 4 or 5 days or so. But if you are diabetic, it very rapidly progresses into the paranasal sinuses also, and it has more affinity for the maxillary and ethmoid sinuses. Any dental aspects that you would like to put on light on regarding mucormycosis? Points to remember while checking the patient oral and nasal signs. Doc, I have already mentioned, check for the signs on the palate. Look for the blackish scars or ulcerations over the palate, especially over the midline or on the paramedian side. Those are the things what we check for. And the palate, recently I have seen a patient where only the tooth was involved, and from the tooth it was being neglected. From the tooth itself, it directly went into the maxillary sinus and entirely. So that was the origin. So when you consult a oromaxillofacial surgeon or any dental doctor, this tooth also should be checked for. You can just hit it with your mirror, whatever you have, and if they have excruciating pain, or if there is some foul smelling discharge, then and there take a biopsy, and you send it for fungal culture. And fungal culture, as you know, it should be kept in the normal saline, not in the formalin solution, how we do for a biopsy. And the nasal signs I have already mentioned, Dr. Keta. Okay, the next question is from Dr. Rajat. HR, can there be systemic involvement of mucormycosis? Yes, there can absolutely be. That's the reason there are several kinds of mucormycosis, and right now I'm more emphasizing on the rhino-orbital mucormycosis because my concern of topic is that being an ENT surgeon. Next, Mr. Venkatesh Dasoju, good evening, ma'am. Use of AMP4 deoxycholate form as nasal douchings and high risk individuals. And Mr. Venkatesh Garu, that's an extremely good question. I also mentioned you use of AMP4 deoxycholate, but not as a prophylaxis because I have not there is not enough research suggesting that there is not enough literature on that. But in the post-operative patients we have given the oxycolate solution because we didn't have liposomal, and because that was extremely costly. And this amphor deoxycolate is really useful in post-operative packing. And as prophylaxis, I cannot just comment on this because there is not enough literature on that. And next from Seema Narula, what precautions should be taken while? Oh, that's an extremely important thing what you mentioned, Ms. Seema Narula Garu. The oxygen cylinders, I didn't specifically mention this because the oxygen cylinders which have been used by us earlier and even now we are using a medical grade cylinders, but there has been a situation where we had to use industrial use of oxygen. There is a lots of difference between the industrial oxygen and a medical grade oxygen. And use of this industrial oxygen, because we were unable to provide medical grade oxygen for all the people, the government was unable to provide, so we just government was supplying us with the industrial grade oxygen, and that created a lot of haphazard among the people. I do agree, but there is once again not enough research on this. And there was also mentioned that the mucor was growing in the humidifiers which were being used for the oxygen concentrators or the oxygen cylinders or the nebulizers when tap water was being used on the distal water. But once again, there is a still research going on, and there are several doctors, infectious disease specialists who are working on this. Bigger centers in Mumbai and Delhi, and even at our Telangana, there are working on this. An epidemiologist usually looks into this. But in the recent newspapers and all, and even in our IMA guidelines also, there was a strict suggestion that please use distilled water instead of the tap water being used in the humidifiers or nebulizers. So even if you're using an oxygen concentrator at home, make sure that you are using distilled water, because this tap water, we do never know what's happening with that. Mucor could be there, and once again you may start inhaling that. That's an extremely good point what you mentioned, Miss Seema Narulagar. And next one, Dudekula Saddam Garu. After the corona tested positive, later some days it is negative, breathing is good, but some blood clots coming from the nose. Then it is really important for you to come and visit an ENT surgeon, because probably the physician would have started you on some anticoagulant medication also prophylactically, because anticoagulant and antiplatelet medications right now are given in order to prevent thromboembolic events which are happened by the mucor. And that will be released very shortly. There is lots of discussion going on in the jury right now. Even I do not have specific thing, but there are a physician who have already started on anticoagulant and anti-platelet. Please do consult your physician first, and if you feel that it is still continuing some blood clots and all, consult an ENT surgeon, nearby ENT surgeon. Hope that answers your question. And can you, Mr. Question from Meera Ramesh Garu, can you please tell us more on aftercare of the sinuses post surgery? On the sinuses post surgery, you'll be entirely under our control. We ask you not even to touch your nasal cavity, because it is we who are going to deal with the post op care. We who will be giving you some nasal douching, nasal washes, and we'll be taking a serial biopsy and all to make sure that you are completely safe, you are completely out of this fungus in your body. So you don't worry about this. If you are a doctor, please do contact me via email or do contact via the Medversity people. We'll just let you know what is the protocol we are following at our center. And next is from Mr. Saurabh Pandey. When you prefer local anesthesia for FIS? So this is a different thing for from this mucormycosis. Uh, we at our center, because we have entire laminar flow in our OTs and we have a navigation guided equipment and we have an extraordinary anesthesia team with us, we are going ahead with a general anesthesia only because we do not want spread of this. And there are certain centers where they are preferring local anesthesia for this mucormycosis because of the thromboembolic events it is causing, because of the anesthesia gases whichever are. But it would be better if this is commented by an anesthetist rather than me telling that. But we at our center are directly going with the surgical, general anesthesia. As I mentioned you, we have an extraordinary team of anesthesia doctors. One more question. Can you, Mr. Meera Ramesh, can you please tell us more? Oh, this is done. Ma'am, from Manikantham Garu, ma'am, after surgery. Oh my God, there are a couple of questions. We should go fast. Manikantham, ma'am, after the surgery, will there be any difficulty or mucociliary function? See, Mr. Manikantham Garu, this is once again a good question. This is basically not a functional endoscopic sinus surgery what we are doing. Of course, I have placed a slide about a face there. This is just an endoscopic surgery. We are not going to preserve any of your mucociliary function. This will be an aggressive surgical debridement. Here, not importance will be given. The most importance will be given for the disease clearance, for the dead and necrotic tissue to entirely get removed. There will be no problem in breathing. You'll be breathing absolutely normal, but with the mucociliary function, yes, it will definitely be affected. So we ask you, after you are completely recovered, after you are done with your ampho-B, with your posaconazole or isoavoconazole, to periodically do nasal douchings. So it definitely creates lots of mess within the body, lots of morbidity within us, but we are going to save your lives. That's what I want to emphasize on. Next is from Sachi, Mr. Sachidananda Garu. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Sachidananda Garu. Some has already, from Dr. Manish, some has already started giving prophylaxis for mucor. Once again, there is not, as I told you earlier, stop irrational use of amphotericin B or any kind of antifungal medications. We require antifungal medication for the post-operative patients 1 day before the surgical procedure. Yes, before planning for the pre-anesthetic checkup and all, our amphotericin B is administered just 1 day before. Even we are giving, to be frank with you people, most of the doctors are giving just to safeguard you from the thromboembolic events, but not as a prophylactic medications. Please do not consume antifungal medications that way, because this has a lot of effect on your liver function and also the renal function, this antifungal medications. And hope that answers your question. Mr. Rehmat Jahan Beggar, which antifungal tablets are effective in starting stage? Can antifungal as a precursor? Once again, I mentioned in the previous thing itself, there is no specific antiprophylaxis that way. Always prevention is better than cure. Just avoid the things whichever I have specifically. Just take that preventive measures. That is more than enough. Don't take any kind of antifungal medications as such. Use of oxygen cylinders can cause black fungus from Seema Narula. Miss Seema Narula Garu, I already answered this question. It's not as such oxygen cylinder. It's because of the nebulizers or the humidifiers which are there. The direct oxygen cylinders, once again, there is not enough literature to support it. Mr. Ahmed, which antifungal I have answered? Dr. T, adding methylene blue to humidifiers, is it useful? Once again, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Garu, that's a good question. There is a research which has already been done, and it clearly states that the methylene blue, whichever has been placed in the humidifiers, is definitely not useful. In fact, it caused some aggressive reaction for the patient, and it has been come out from in the paper also, and clearly it has come out now from the jury and even everywhere on the social media also. Please do not give methylene blue or some other thing, some other dyes in the humidifiers. It even more it causes even more worse thing. In fact, the patient died of this methylene blue reaction. We lost a patient, not at our center, one of the patient who was given a trial with this. One more question from Manisha Kelam, Mr. Manisha Kelamgar. Surgery, some complaints, redness, eyes watering. How can we identify mucormycosis? It's done in cataract surgery after post-op. Once again, please consult your ophthalmologist for this. No panic at all. There are several. There are many ENT doctors. If you still feel there is some thing happening with your eyes, after consulting your ophthalmologist, you may also consult your ENT specialist. We just do certain simple investigations, and you could just rule out whether you have some mucor or not. Question from Dr. Madhulekha. How far the patient's getting recovered from surgery? What is the post-op status of sub patients? Oh, Dr. Madhulekha, I know you, darling. I know you, Dr. Madhulekha Tota. You are my relative. In fact, I guess you are the one who asked me. How are the patients are getting recovered after surgery? Dr. Madhulekha, so you being a physician and a damn good physician, in fact, after recovering from the surgery, it depends on the mode of surgery which they are going to. The first one, when they are going through medial maxillectomy, I place the surgical videos of my previous patients, and they are doing extraordinarily well. But the patients whom we have done earlier, along with our oculoplastic surgeon, where the orbit was also removed, that patient didn't take enough of amphotericin B, and we could recognize that there is some amount of fungal debris which was left over. So we are planning for a revision surgery in that single individual patient. And what is the post-op status of when the early diagnosis, early treatment, excellent prognosis, and as it proceeds into the palate and all, it's causing a very bad situation, you know that. Okay, so that answers your question, Dr. Madhuleka. Dr. Sundar,
Uh,
I'm done with the
yeah,
question.
thank you, Dr. Sri.
Hope the
We
present
overran. There are so many questions. It happened. Yeah,
yes,
it was
hope it
really
was
interesting, and
useful.
then uh, yeah, it was really useful, and then it shows that many people needs to be sensitized about mucormycosis in the medical fraternity itself. Thank you one and all for attending this webinar, and thank you, Dr. Sri Kadapa Rao, for the wonderful presentation. Keep on following Medvasti on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn for more updates. Bye for now, and see you soon in our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.